first hint of what was to come arrived in a calendar invitation. It was for a quarterly strategy review. My name was not on the attendee list. I was the head of logistics. My department was the sole topic, yet I was to be absent. The meeting was set by the new vice president of operations, Marcus Thorne. He had been with the company for 3 months. He had a background in management consulting. He believed in streamlined reporting structures. My exclusion was not an oversight. It was a statement. I received a follow-up email from his assistant. It was courteous and cold. It stated that pre-read materials were attached for my awareness. My input was to be provided in writing. Thorne preferred a consolidated view from his direct reports. My manager, the senior director, was newly promoted. He was a former peer. He now echoed Thorne's language about efficiency. The pre-read was a 15-slide deck. It outlined a proposed centralization of all logistics functions. The recommendation was to form a shared service center. It would be located 2,000 miles away. My team's functions were color-coded in red. Red denoted redundancy. The financial analysis showed significant projected savings. The numbers were aggressive. They assumed a seamless transition. They ignored key client contractual terms. I drafted a concise, factual email. I listed 3 specific client agreements. Each had clauses governing operational location changes. Each required 90 days written notice. Each permitted the client to renegotiate or terminate upon such notice. I sent the email to my manager and Thorne. I received a single-line reply from Thorne, copied to all. It said the legal department would handle any client notifications during implementation. The humiliation was quiet, procedural. My next one-on-one with my director was canceled. It was not rescheduled. My access to the new project's SharePoint folder was set to view only. I could see the timelines. They were accelerating. I could not comment on the files. An organizational chart was uploaded. My name was not on it. My team was a series of vacant boxes, labeled TBD SSC. I scheduled a meeting with the head of legal. Her name was Anya. We had worked together for 7 years. The meeting was accepted. Then it was moved by her executive assistant. Then it was canceled due to a conflict. I received a formal notice from Human Resources. It was a standard restructuring notification. It outlined the company's commitment to retaining talent. It invited me to apply for any open roles for which I was qualified. The attached list showed 47 openings. None were in logistics. None were at my level. My corporate email signature was suddenly outdated. The automated directory updated my title. It now read Logistics Lead Transition. I had not been informed. My director sent a chat message. He said it was updating all signatures for consistency. He said not to worry about it. The pressure point was a single document. I found it in an old project archive. It was from an acquisition 5 years prior. Our company had purchased a small, specialized freight broker. The deal was minor. The integration was handled by my predecessor and the legal team. I was searching for a specific carrier contract. The archive was poorly indexed. I saw a file named Closing Docs Finals signed. I opened it out of professional habit. The acquisition agreement was standard. But a schedule attached was not. It was a list of assumed liabilities. One item was a corporate guarantee. It was a relic. It guaranteed the performance of a separate, now-defunct entity. The guarantee was unlimited. It was signed by the former CEO. Our current CEO had been the CFO at the time. His signature was on the authorization resolution. The guaranteed entity was called Midwest Regional Logistics Consortium. I had never heard of it. A quick search showed it was dissolved. Its assets were sold. Its obligations were supposedly extinguished, but our guarantee was not. It was a sleeping liability. It was tied to a long-term lease. The lease was for a cross-dock facility in Chicago. The facility was still operating. It was now operated by a large commercial landlord. The lease had 21 years remaining. The calendar reminder for the strategy review popped up. It was in 1 hour. I was not attending. My team was anxious. They asked for guidance. I had none to give. I told them to perform their duties. I closed my office door. I pulled the old acquisition file. I read every page. The guarantee was ironclad. It was a joint and several obligation. It meant our company was on the hook, not just the acquired shell. The potential exposure was the full lease liability. I calculated a rough number. It was substantial. It was a figure that would require board-level disclosure if triggered. I opened the company's internal policy portal. I searched for the procedure on contingent liabilities. Policy FIN 407 was clear. Any potential liability over a certain threshold must be reported. The report must go to the CFO and the audit committee chair. The threshold was far lower than the lease exposure. The reporting mechanism was a specific form. It required supporting documentation. I saved a copy of the policy. I saved the acquisition agreement. I saved my calculations. I did not submit anything. Not yet. The strategy meeting would be starting now. Thorne would be presenting his streamlined future, a future where I was already erased. The silence after the strategy meeting was profound. My phone did not ring. My inbox received only automated system updates. The project to dissolve my department was now called Project Atlas. Its status was marked green on the leadership dashboard. I was copied on an email from Thorne to the CFO. It summarized the projected savings from Atlas. The number was bolded. It was a round, impressive figure. It would be featured in the next quarter's earnings call talking points. My analysis of the client contract risks was not mentioned. It was as if it had never been sent. A new document appeared in the project folder. It was a transition service agreement. It was a draft between our company and the new shared service center vendor. The vendor was a third-party outsourcing firm. I had reviewed their standard performance metrics years ago. They were weak on liability. The draft agreement had a glaring omission. It did not assign responsibility for client contractual penalties. Those penalties would remain with our company. The savings projection did not account for this. I performed a simple cross-reference. I matched the client list against the penalty clauses. The potential costs offset 70% of the first year's savings. I prepared a second email. It was not sent to Thorne. I sent it to the head of procurement. Procurement was responsible for vendor contracts. I asked a single question. I asked if the TSA's indemnification section was under legal review. I attached the relevant client contract pages. I did not offer analysis. I merely asked for confirmation. The head of procurement replied within an hour. He copied the head of legal, Anya. He said legal review was pending. He thanked me for the client documents. Anya did not reply. Her silence was a signal. She was now aware. The procedural wall was beginning to form. My director called me unexpectedly. His voice was strained. He asked me to join a call. It was with Thorne and a representative from the outsourcing vendor. I joined. Thorne did not acknowledge me. He spoke to my director. He said there were questions about client contracts. He said the vendor needed assurances. The vendor rep asked direct questions about operational handoffs. Thorne directed my director to answer. My director stumbled. He did not know the details. I remained silent. Thorne finally asked me for the information. I provided dates and notice periods. I stated them factually. Thorne thanked me. He told my director to ensure I documented everything for the vendor. The call ended. The next day, an HR business partner requested a meeting. It was framed as a career progression dialogue. We met in a small conference room. The HR representative was polite. She discussed the company's changing landscape. She mentioned my long tenure. She outlined the severance package parameters. It was a generous package. It was contingent on signing a full release of claims. It was also contingent on a full knowledge transfer. She emphasized the importance of a smooth transition. She said my professionalism was noted. She slid a printed brochure across the table. It outlined outplacement services. I took the brochure. I said I would review it. I asked if the knowledge transfer had a defined scope. She said my director would provide that. The scope document arrived by email. It was 20 pages long. It listed every process, every contact, every system login. It required me to create training videos. It required me to validate all procedural documentation. The deadline was 4 weeks. Completing it would be a full-time effort. It was designed to consume me. It was designed to keep me from doing anything else. I acknowledged the document. I did not commit to the timeline. I began methodically. I recorded the most basic of tutorials. I saved them to the designated drive. I worked at a normal, thorough pace. I did not hurry. During this, I continued my quiet research. The Chicago lease guarantee was a complex knot. The original lessee was the defunct consortium. Our guarantee made us a co-obligor. The landlord was a massive real estate investment trust. Their compliance was relentless. I found their latest annual report online. They listed their major leases. The Chicago cross-dock was listed. The lessee name was the old consortium. The footnote was interesting. It stated the lease was backed by a corporate guarantee from a publicly traded logistics firm. That was us. The lease had escalation clauses. Its current annual rent was a number that made me pause. Policy FIN 407 required a form to be submitted to the CFO. The form needed a narrative description. It needed a financial estimate. It needed a probability assessment. I completed the form with cold precision. I labeled the probability remote but quantifiable. The triggering event would be a default by the current facility operator. That operator was a subcontractor to the landlord. Their financials were not public. I filed the form in my desk drawer. It was not submitted. It was ready. The power was not in wielding it. The power was in its mere existence. Its required destination was the highest level of financial oversight. A contradiction surfaced. An email from the CFO's office went to Thorne. It was forwarded to my director. It asked for a detailed breakdown of Project Atlas's one-time implementation costs. The savings figure had attracted executive attention. They wanted to book the savings sooner. Thorne's reply was confident. He listed costs for severance, vendor setup, and system migration. He omitted the potential client penalties. He omitted the cost of any lease liabilities tied to closing domestic facilities. My director was told to validate the numbers. He came to my office. He asked for my help. He said Thorne needed it for the board package. I said I would review the data. I provided a revised spreadsheet. I added 2 lines. Line 1, client contractual penalty exposure range. I listed the low and high estimate. I cited the contract clauses. Line 2, facility lease obligations post-transition. I listed only our owned or directly leased properties. I did not mention the Chicago guarantee. The Chicago facility was not ours. It was not on any of our books. My director looked at the additions. He said Thorne would not like these lines. I said they were factual contingencies. He asked me to remove them. I said I could not. He took the spreadsheet. He said he would handle it. The revised document Thorne sent to the CFO did not contain my 2 lines. It contained a new footnote. The footnote stated, "All legal and contractual risks have been reviewed and accounted for by the legal department." It was a masterstroke. It pushed the responsibility onto Anya's team. I checked the document's metadata out of habit. The last editor was Thorne. The author was my director. I was not in the version history. I was erased from the record. The pressure point tightened. The board package was being finalized. The guarantee was a silent fault line beneath it, and legal had just been put on record, unknowingly, for risks they had not reviewed. The board package was approved and distributed. Project Atlas was officially launched with an all-hands email from the CEO. It celebrated the innovative restructuring. It thanked the teams involved. My name was not among them. My director's name was. The transition phase began in earnest. My days were filled with recording procedural videos. I narrated them in a flat, calm tone. I showed how to reroute a priority shipment. I explained the customs documentation for a specific client. The work was mind-numbing. It was meant to be. It kept me from looking elsewhere. I looked elsewhere. I requested a meeting with the internal audit department. My pretext was standard. I cited policy OPS 112. It required audit sign-off on the transfer of any controlled processes. Logistics had several. The The chief audit executive's office granted a 30-minute slot. Her name was Elaine Riggs. She was known for her meticulous, unforgiving approach. I prepared a single page. It listed the controlled processes. It mapped them to the vendor's proposed control framework. There were gaps, significant gaps. I did not highlight them. I merely presented the two documents side by side. Elaine scanned them. She asked few questions. She took notes. She said her team would conduct a pre-implementation review. She thanked me for my procedural diligence. This triggered an automatic process. Internal audit opened a work ticket. Their review would take 2 weeks. It would involve interviews. It would require evidence. The Project Atlas timeline did not account for an audit review. Thorne's office sent a terse email to my director. It demanded to know why audit was involved. My director forwarded it to me. I replied with a copy of Policy OPS 112. I noted that as the process owner, I was obligated to initiate the review. I said I had done so to ensure a compliant transition. My director forwarded my reply. There was no response. The project's status flickered from green to yellow. The audit review created friction. The vendor hated audits. They delayed providing requested documents. They argued over the scope of controls. Elaine's team issued a preliminary finding. They stated that the transfer of controlled processes without validated controls posed a material risk. The finding was reported to the audit committee of the board. It was a routine disclosure, but it introduced a note of caution. The CFO's office asked for a mitigation plan. Thorne was now responsible for producing it. He had to work with a department he viewed as a roadblock. He had to work with me. He scheduled a working session. It was in a large conference room. He arrived late. He did not sit. He stood at the head of the table. He laid out his expectation. He wanted the audit finding closed within 5 business days. He told Elaine's lead auditor that the risk was theoretical. He said the vendor had a SOC 2 report. The auditor pointed out the SOC 2 did not cover our specific client requirements. Thorne turned to me. He asked me to bridge the gap. He asked me to draft the control language for the vendor contract. I said I could draft the language. I noted that legal would need to approve any contract amendment. I also noted that the vendor had previously resisted liability clauses. Thorne's jaw tightened. He said to draft it and send it to legal. He left the room. The auditor and I exchanged a look. It was a look of professional understanding. We both knew what was happening. Thorne was trying to force compliance through volume. He was creating a trail of directives. I drafted the control language. It was precise and burdensome. It required the vendor to assume full financial responsibility for any control failure. I sent it to Anya in legal, copying Thorne. The email subject was urgent contract amendment required per internal audit. I did not write urgent. Thorne's assistant had added it. Anya replied 2 days later. Her reply was a model of legal caution. She agreed the language was necessary for risk mitigation. She also stated that the vendor's master service agreement contained a liability cap. The cap was a low, fixed amount. It would override my new language. To remove the cap, she wrote, would require renegotiation of the master agreement. That would take months. She copied the head of procurement. She copied Thorne. The yellow status on the project dashboard turned to red. The projected savings timeline was now in jeopardy. Thorne escalated. He requested a meeting with the CFO. He framed it as a critical path issue. He needed support to pressure legal and procurement to be pragmatic. The CFO agreed to a meeting. I learned this through a calendar invitation that was broadened at the last minute to include subject matter experts. My name was added. So was Anya's. The meeting was for 8 a.m. the next morning. The agenda had one item: remove blockers for Project Atlas. That night, I prepared a new document. It was not for the meeting. It was the FIN 407 form for the contingent liability. I completed every field. I attached the acquisition agreement. I attached the lease. I attached my financial calculation. The estimated liability was a figure that represented 3 years of Project Atlas's promised savings. I printed the form and its attachments. I placed them in a sealed envelope. I addressed it to the CFO and the audit committee chair. I wrote confidential, contingent liability disclosure on the front. I did not send it. I placed it in my briefcase. The 8 a.m. meeting was tense. The CFO was a numbers man. He was impatient. He asked Thorne to state the problem. Thorne said legal and procurement were being obstructionist. He said their risk aversion was costing the company real money. The CFO looked at Anya. He asked for her position. Anya was calm. She explained the liability cap. She said removing it was a commercial negotiation, not a legal one. The head of procurement said the vendor had already refused. Thorne argued that the savings were being held hostage. The CFO then looked at me. He asked for my technical assessment. Could the transition proceed without this amendment? I gave a factual answer. I said yes, the transition could proceed. I said the controls would not be legally enforceable. I said the risk of a client penalty event would therefore remain on our company's books. The audit finding would remain open. The CFO asked for the financial magnitude of that risk. I provided the range from my earlier analysis. It was a substantial number. The room was quiet. The CFO turned back to Thorne. He did not raise his voice. He said Thorne's savings projection was now net of this risk. He said the board would see it that way. He told Thorne to solve the contract issue without compromising the company. He stood up and left. Thorne was left with a red project and a gutted business case. His authority was diminished in that room. He looked at me. He said he needed a solution by end of week. He did not ask. He declared. I said I would evaluate options. After the meeting, Anya lingered as I gathered my notes. She did not look at me. She spoke softly. She said the guarantee file from the old acquisition had been retrieved. She said it was being reviewed. Then she walked out. The pressure point was now active. Legal knew. The guarantee was no longer my private discovery. It was a live file. And Thorne, in his rush to erase obstacles, had just drawn maximum attention to every risk sitting on the company's balance sheet. The week passed without a solution. Thorne's directive hung in the air, unmet. The vendor refused to budge on the liability cap. Internal audit formally closed their review with an unmitigated finding. This triggered a quarterly reporting requirement to the board's risk committee. The red status on Project Atlas was now permanent. The CEO's office requested a full briefing. Thorne was to present it. He was given 2 days to prepare. The briefing required a complete risk register. It had to include all financial, operational, and legal exposures. This demand forced a convergence. The legal department's review of the old acquisition file was complete. Anya scheduled a meeting with the CFO and the head of corporate development. It was a small, private meeting. I was not invited, but the output of that meeting was a new line item on the corporate risk register. It was listed as Legacy Lease Guarantee Potential Exposure. The estimated financial impact was my number. The ownership for remediation was assigned to the finance department. The entry was discovered by Thorne's financial analyst as she built the risk register for the CEO briefing. She highlighted it in yellow and brought it to Thorne. He summoned me to his office. It was my first time there. The space was large with a view. He did not offer a seat. He pointed to his monitor. He asked me what I knew about the guarantee. I said I had come across it during routine archival work. I said I had followed policy FIN 407 by preparing the disclosure form. I said I had been awaiting the appropriate moment to submit it through channels. He asked why I had not informed him. I said my focus had been on the knowledge transfer per my director's scope document. I said the guarantee fell outside my operational purview. It was a financial contingency. My answer was technically correct. It was also ice cold. Thorne realized the timeline. He realized I had known for weeks. He understood the implication. His project was floundering on small contract risks. Now a massive, dormant liability had surfaced, and it had surfaced in the context of his executive briefing. The two issues were not connected, but they would appear connected to anyone reading the risk register. His face lost its color. He told me to leave. I returned to my desk. I continued recording a training video. It was on the proper way to complete a bill of lading. The CEO briefing happened behind closed doors. We did not learn the details. The aftermath was visible in the calendar. A series of urgent meetings were scheduled. They involved the CFO, the General Counsel, and Thorne. Project Atlas was not mentioned. The subject was portfolio liability review. The tone at the leadership level shifted. A memo came from the CFO. It mandated a full review of all historical acquisitions for similar guarantees. The legal and finance departments were to lead. Operations was to provide support. Thorne was notably not listed as a lead. His role was to provide operational context. It was a demotion in all but name. The organizational machinery now engaged on a new priority. The guarantee was a tangible, quantifiable problem. Project Atlas was a theoretical future saving. Corporations default to solving tangible problems. Resources were pulled from the transition project to staff the liability review. Thorne's team shrunk. His visibility diminished. He began sending frantic, detailed emails late at night. They were filled with action items and deadlines for Atlas. Fewer people replied. His messages were lost in the new urgency surrounding the legal review. A critical procedural event occurred. The corporate secretary's office circulated a draft of the quarterly 10Q filing for the SEC. The draft included a new section under commitments and contingencies. It described the guarantee. It stated the company was evaluating the potential exposure. It noted that while no claim was pending, the magnitude was such that it warranted disclosure. This was a serious step. It meant the lawyers feared a material event. The draft was sent to the Disclosure Committee for review. Thorne was on that committee. He was now forced to officially acknowledge the liability he had just learned about. The board's audit committee scheduled a special meeting. The agenda was to discuss the guarantee and the internal audit findings on Project Atlas. The two were formally linked by the audit committee chair. He wanted to understand the overall risk culture of the operations division. Thorne was required to present a corrective action plan for the audit findings. He worked through a weekend on it. He submitted a plan that was largely a repackaging of old promises. The audit committee rejected it. They asked for a more fundamental review of the Atlas business case. Pressure creates errors. Thorne, seeking to demonstrate control, issued a directive to accelerate the physical transition of logistics work to the vendor. He authorized the vendor to begin interacting with clients. He did this without a signed service agreement amendment. He did it to create momentum. He did it to show progress. The vendor, eager to start billing, sent out introductory emails to my client list. One of those clients was our largest. Their contract had a strict clause. It forbade any third-party data handling without a prior security audit. The client's general counsel received the vendor's email. They called our general counsel. They invoked the contract. They declared a breach. Legal chaos ensued. The client demanded an immediate remediation plan. They threatened to withhold millions in payments. They suspended all new business. Anya's team was now dealing with a live fire. The source of the fire was an operational directive from Thorne. An email trail was pulled. It showed Thorne's explicit instruction to proceed. It showed the vendor acknowledging the instruction. My director had been copied. He had raised a mild concern. Thorne had overruled him. The evidence was clear. It was a unilateral decision that violated contract. The general counsel took the matter to the CEO. The CEO requested Thorne's presence. That meeting lasted 15 minutes. Thorne emerged looking hollow. He went to his office and closed the door. By the end of the day, a company-wide email came from the CEO. It announced that Marcus Thorne was leaving the company to pursue other opportunities, effective immediately. The head of internal audit, Elaine Riggs, would assume oversight of the operations division on an interim basis. Project Atlas was paused, pending a comprehensive review. There was no celebration. No one spoke of it openly. Work continued. I finished my last training video. I submitted the completed knowledge transfer document to my director. He accepted it without comment. A week later, I was asked to meet with Elaine in her capacity as interim head of operations. Her office was austere. She offered me a seat. She said the company had identified a critical need. They needed someone to lead the remediation of the client breach and to manage the legacy liability review from an operational standpoint. She said my institutional knowledge was considered invaluable. She offered me the role of Director of Operational Risk and Compliance. It was a lateral move in title. In authority, it was a significant increase. It reported directly to her. I accepted. The work was familiar. It involved documents, procedures, and quiet enforcement. My first task was to draft the remediation plan for the angry client. My second was to coordinate with legal on the guarantee evaluation. The envelope in my briefcase was no longer needed. I shredded it. The mechanism had worked as designed. The antagonist had been given every opportunity to see the contradictions. He had been given every opportunity to follow procedure. He had chosen not to. He had destroyed himself with his own decisions. The collapse was procedural, legal, and total. A final email arrived from HR. It was a notification of a change in reporting structure. My new title was listed. My old position of logistics lead was officially closed. The systems updated in real time. My new email signature generated automatically. I looked at it for a moment. Then I closed the notification. I opened the liability review tracker. I began to methodically assign the next set of tasks. The work was boring. It was important. It was exactly where I needed to be.